And so you can place your hands in the namaskar position if you like, and just try to follow my lead, follow the speed of how I am doing the chanting. Of course, we can't hear you, but anyway, just do it there in your own room. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from taking life. I undertake the training rule to abstain from stealing. I undertake the training rule to abstain from sensual misconduct. I undertake the training rule to abstain from false speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from malicious speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from harsh speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from frivolous speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from wrong livelihood and from intoxicating drinks and drugs causing heedlessness. Such indeed is the Buddha, worthy, perfectly enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, well gone, knower of the worlds, supreme trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and exalted. Well expounded is the Dhamma by the Buddha, directly visible, unaffected by time, calling one to come and see, leading onwards to be realized by the wise. The order of the Buddha's disciples is practicing well. They are of upright conduct. They have entered the right path. They are practicing correctly. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 kinds of individuals. This order of the Buddha's disciples is worthy of offerings and hospitality, worthy of gifts and salutations, supreme field of merit for the world. With candle lights dispelling dark, I respect the perfect Buddha, the light of the triple worlds, who dispels the darkness of delusion. With these flowers I respect the Buddha. By this merit may I gain liberation. As these flowers fade and wither, so will this body decay and die. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure mind, then suffering follows, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with a pure mind, then happiness follows, as your shadow follows you around. If due to negligence I have done some wrong, by body, speech, or mind, forgive me of that offense, O Bhante, perfect one of vast wisdom. Forgive me of that offense, O Dhamma, visible and unaffected by time. Forgive me of that offense, O Sangha, practicing well and supreme. I have gained a vast mass of merit, respecting the Honorable Triple Gem, By the spiritual power of that merit, may my obstacles be destroyed. By means of this meritorious deeds, may I never join with the foolish. May I always join with the wise until the time I attain Nibbana. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear-struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings live. Scroll up. Dependent on ignorance, volitional formations arise. Dependent on volitional formations, consciousness arises. Dependent on consciousness, mentality and materiality arise. Dependent on mentality and materiality, the sixfold base arises. Dependent on the sixfold base, contact arises. Dependent on contact, feeling arises. Dependent on feeling, craving arises. Dependent on craving, grasping arises. Dependent on grasping, becoming arises. Dependent on becoming, birth arises. Dependent on birth arise aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus there is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. Through the entire cessation of this ignorance, volitional formations cease. Through the cessation of volitional formations, consciousness ceases. Through the cessation of consciousness, mentality and materiality cease, and contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, and birth cease. Through the cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and hence sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair all cease. Thus there is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Through many a birth I wandered in Samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. Sorrowful is it to be born again and again. O house builder, thou art seen, thou shalt build no house again. All thy rafters are broken, thy ridgepole is shattered. This mind has attained the unconditioned, achieved is the end of craving. Many deities and humans have pondered on blessings, desiring their well-being. Tell me the blessing supreme, to associate not with the foolish, to be with the wise, to honor the worthy ones. This is a blessing supreme, to reside in a suitable location, having done good deeds in the past, to set oneself in the right direction. This is a blessing supreme. Great learning and skilled in a craft, well trained in discipline, utterances well spoken. This is a blessing supreme. To be well caring of mother and father, looking after spouse and children, to have a harmless occupation. This is a blessing supreme. Selfless giving, living a just life, supporting relatives and blameless actions. This is a blessing supreme. To cease and abstain from evil, complete restraint from intoxicants, diligent and virtuous practices. This is a blessing supreme. To be reverent and humble, content and grateful, to hear the Dhamma at the right time. This is a blessing supreme. To be patient and obedient, visiting recluses, to discuss the Dhamma at the right time. This is a blessing supreme. To live austerely and purely, to see the noble truths, and to realize Nibbana. This is a blessing supreme. A mind unshaken when touched by the worldly states, sorrowless, stainless, and secure. This is a blessing supreme. Those who have fulfilled all these are everywhere invincible. They find well-being everywhere. Theirs is a blessing supreme. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, friends, As we've you got it right? So welcome to this small sort of celebration or reflection on Vesak. And the actual Vesak day, or the full moon day in May, falls on May 7th this year. But we decided to observe that today on our regular Sunday broadcasts. Now, I think all of you know that the Vesak is the celebration of the three main events, important events in the life of the Buddha: the birth of the Buddha, the full enlightenment of the Buddha, and the parinibbana, or the passing away of the Buddha into the deathless state. And so these are the three events that we rejoice in and recollect on the Vesak day. And so this Dhamma talk is going to focus on that, and I'm going to recount certain aspects of the life of the Buddha, and then including aspects of the Dhamma, and then going on to try to see how they pertain to our own lives. Now, as most of you know, the Buddha, before he attained enlightenment, he was a bodhisattva. And way back in time, it is said that he made a vow to become a Buddha at the foot or the feet of the Dipankara Buddha, who was a Buddha back in antiquity. And he made that vow to become a Buddha one day. And for over 500 lifetimes, he was practicing the 10 paramitas. I'm not going to mention them all now, but the 10 perfections, different qualities of the mind, such as generosity and metta and patience and wisdom and so on. Those are qualities needed to attain supreme enlightenment. And so in the last birth, before the Buddha was born onto the earth the last time, he was residing, it is said, in the Tusita heaven. And he was waiting there for the right time to take rebirth into the human realm. So this was kind of pre-planned. And out of compassion, he wanted to wait for the right time when his teachings would make the most impact on the world, in the world of human beings. And so he chose to be born into a royal family, his father and mother being king and the queen. And so he was born as Prince Siddhartha. And they named him Siddhartha. And it is said that the king summoned some wise men to come and look at the boy and look at the marks of the boy and kind of try to prophesy what kind of a life this boy would lead. So these wise men came there and looked over the marks, and it was concluded that he would either take up one of two professions. Either he would take over the throne from his father and be a world-turning monarch, or he would renounce the world and become a supremely enlightened Buddha. Now, of course, his father, being a king, wanted his son to take over the throne and didn't want him to become an ascetic or become a Buddha and renounce the world. So the king, it is said, had, built 3 different palaces and was trying to keep the young boy secluded from the realities of life, the external world, seeing old and sick and dying people and the chaos of the outside world. So anyway, the boy Siddhartha grew up in the life of luxury until he was about 29 years old, where he got married. And then he had one son. And at some point along the way, he was able to convince his horseman, or his personal servant, the horseman, Chana, to take him outside the gates against his father's wishes. So one day they snuck out of the palace gates, and it said they went through the countryside in the village, where he saw the 4 Deva messengers. And the first one was that he saw a sick man, or a sick person. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The first one he saw was an old person, walking all hunched over with a cane, with broken teeth and gray hair. And the Siddhartha had never seen a person like that, because they kept all the old sick people out of the palace. So Siddhartha saw that and asked the charioteer, who's that? The charioteer Chana said, well, that's an old person. And the Buddha said, well, will everybody become like that? Even me? Yes, I'm afraid so. That's the reality of life. And so they went on further, and they then saw a sick person laying in filth and covered with boils and sores, and maybe it was a leper missing thumbs or some limbs. And Buddha said, who is that? He said, well, that's a diseased person. And again, Siddhartha said, would everybody become like that? He said, yes, most people will become like that. Sickness and disease, it's a part of life. So they went on further, and then they saw a dead person being carried on a stretcher to be cremated. And then Siddhartha said, well, what is that? What's happening to that person? And he said, well, that person died. The body is useless now. They're going to go and cremate it. He said, really? Everybody's going to die? Even me? And he said, yes, even you, young prince. And so that moved him quite a lot, because again, he was shielded from these things all those years. And then he saw the 4th Deva messenger, which was an ascetic, wearing a yellow robe, walking slowly along the road, and he was carrying a alms bowl, and he was, looked very serene and calm, walking along the road. And had a kind of a glow or an aura about him. So Siddhartha said, well, who is that? He said, well, that's a holy man. Somebody who's out to discover the truth, to find the deathless state, the end of birth and death. And that really moved the Buddha too. So then they went back to the palace. Anyway, the Buddha, over the next some months and so on, was reflecting on these things. And he gradually became disillusioned with all the luxuries of the palace life. And even his own wife, and he had a lot of dancing girls and minstrels and people that used to entertain him all the time. And, he saw them sleeping one time, and their hair was all disheveled and their makeup running, and, they didn't look so nice. And the Buddha was kind of disgusted by what he saw. And then he got the sort of delusion with this illusion of life, and wanted to find out what is the cause of old age, sickness, and death. And so it was moved him quite a lot. And so it came to the point of one night he renounced the palace life, and he had Chana take him out of the palace to enter the renunciate life. He decided he wanted to follow the life of renunciate because of his memory of seeing that monk. So he went out, cut off his hair and beard, and donned a robe, and then began 6 years of wandering around North India, seeking out different teachers and practicing austerities with the idea to try to discover the truth, or the purpose of life, or what happens after death, to find the end of birth and death. Because at the time, so he studied with different teachers, and he went to different teachers who taught the formless jhana meditations. Two teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. And he learned these jhanic meditations from them, these formless jhanas, which those teachers said, he asked those teachers, he practiced them and perfected those states. And the teachers were very, proud of their disciple being able to so quickly attain these states of meditation. But the Buddha asked Alara Kalama, he said, who reached the state of nothingness. He said, is this your highest truth? Is this all you got? Is this your God? Is this your cosmic consciousness? And Alara Kalama said, yeah, that's all I got. That's all I can give you. But the Buddha wasn't satisfied with that. Because when he came out of those very exalted states of meditation, concentration, he realized his mind hadn't fundamentally changed. He was still dominated by thoughts of I and me and desire and so on. So he realized this couldn't be the highest truth. This couldn't be liberation. This couldn't be moksha. So then he went to the other teacher, Ramaka, this teacher taught him a higher meditation, the state of neither perception nor non-perception. And then he asked him the same question, is this all you got? And Rama said, yeah, But again, the Buddha realized that also was not the highest truth. So he set out by himself. And he thought, why am I wandering around asking others for the truth? And so he went off by himself and he practiced austerities, self-mortification for a long period of time, where he tried to starve the body and torture the body to liberate the soul. That was one of the popular beliefs in those days, that if you practiced self-mortification by standing on one leg for a year, letting your other leg die, or sleeping on beds of nails and never taking a bath, or sleeping on beds of nails, basically torturing the body, starving. And he starved his body until he said he could take with his hand and reach in and touch his backbone or his spinal column through his stomach. He'd gotten so thin. And he couldn't even walk anymore or meditate because he was so weak. So he said, this can't be the way to liberation. And so he left those friends he was practicing with and finally came to the Bodhi tree and saw the beautiful Bodhi tree in Bodhi Gaya, a nice river by, and he said, oh, this is the perfect place for a person to strive for liberation. So he sat under the Bodhi tree and he practiced his meditation. And he said that he meditated all through the night, and he had already perfected his ability to concentrate. So he used that to explore inside of himself rather than attaining some infinite light bliss and other things and that people call God and Brahma and so on. He looked inside of himself into his mind and developed the powers of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom to see the emptiness of the whole mental process and to eventually realize the dissolution of ego consciousness. And he also was able to realize the higher knowledges. So he was able to recall all of his past lives. His mind was so clear that he could penetrate down into the unconscious all the way back to, many thousands of births. And he could see how whenever he died, he was reborn according to his previous karma and so on. And he also developed the divine eye that could see how other people were dying and reborn according to their karma. So he became an expert on the law of karma in that sense. And then he experienced the third knowledge at the end of the night. He attained full enlightenment, or he experienced what is called asavakya kaya, or the cessation of the defilements. Basically, that means he attained arahantship and liberated the mind from samsara. And the first words when the Buddha came out of that deep meditation, his first words were, in fact, we recited them in the puja. Some of you might have recognized them. He said, "Through many a long birth I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. O house builder, thou art seen. Thou shalt build no house again. All thy rafters are broken, thy ridgepole is shattered. This mind has attained the unconditioned, achieved is the end of suffering or craving and suffering." And that was his pang of joy. You know, the first words that came out, it was such a moving experience. So anyway, and so he realized the deathless state, and what he felt was the true nibbana, the state, the end of birth and death. So anyway, he then wanted to go and teach. But he thought he was sitting in the bliss of that liberation for several weeks, contemplating different things. He was so sort of blissed out and no desire to go anywhere. He was just contemplating this Dhamma and said, wow, this Dhamma is so deep and profound, you know. And then he was inclined not to go out and teach. But then the god Sakra up in the heavens heard these thoughts of the Buddha, because he had that power to know what the Buddha was thinking. And so he came down to the Buddha and said, came to him and said, no, please don't think like that. Please go out and teach. There are at least a few people with little dust on their eyes who will be able to see this Dhamma. Because he thought the Dhamma was so deep and profound, and people were so caught up in greed, hatred, and delusion that people wouldn't understand him. And he would get tired trying to convince them of the truth. That's when the Saka came down and beseeched the Buddha to go out and teach, even if there's just a few people that will understand. So then the Buddha surveyed the world with his divine eye and realized, yes, that's true. There are some people who are ready to understand. So that's when he started his mission of disseminating the Dhamma. And he first wanted to go and teach the two teachers that he had, Alara Kalama and Udakarama Putta. But he realized that they had both died since then. And then he thought, well, I'll go to the 5 disciples I was meditating with, practicing austerities with in Saranath. He realized, understood they were practicing at the deer park in Varanasi. So he went there to teach them. And reluctantly, those 5 were reluctant to receive the Buddha because they thought he had backslided and gave up the training and reverted to lecturing. But anyway, the Buddha was somehow able to convince them. And he taught the first sermon of turning the wheel of Dhamma. And the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that I covered 2 weeks ago in the, 2 or 3 weeks ago in the first of the Sutta study programs we did. And then after that first discourse on the turning the wheel of Dhamma, which he explained the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, one of those 5 monks attained the first stage of enlightenment. Kondanya. And then the Buddha realized, my very first sermon, one person realized the state of, entered the stream. That means he's bound for full enlightenment. One person got it, just with one sutta, just one discourse. So that boosted his confidence. And it is said that within the next month or two, all of them had attained enlightenment. Well, it's not said exactly how long it took, but let's say a few months or several months, and they all attained enlightenment. And then they went out and were teaching, and other people had heard about the Buddha and so on, and saw him when he went out for alms. And so more people came and wanted to listen to his Dhamma. And so after a certain time, there were 60 arahants that attained full enlightenment, 60 people, just in a very short period of time. And he told all of them, go out, and not two of you in one direction, go in separate ways, teaching the good word to people. He said, open is the door to the deathless. And so that's what started the Buddha's dispensation, started the sasana. It's called the Buddha sasana. And so that went on for 45 years. The Buddha was teaching in so many different places. So far we have the birth of the Buddha and the enlightenment of the Buddha. And I'm going to explain some of the corollaries to our own life a little bit later when I finish the rest of this section. And so for 45 years, the Buddha, went around teaching, and his disciples also went around the whole north of India teaching. And it said that many thousands of people had become monks, and he also ordained nuns, his whole family, including his stepmother, his wife and child, Rahula. They all attained enlightenment. And it said that even the king, King Suddhodana, attained enlightenment while riding an elephant. And so many people, even lay people, had attained those first streams, levels of enlightenment too. And so the Sangha was established. That means the order of monks and nuns, as well as lay disciples, male lay disciples, female lay disciples, male monks, female monks, or nuns, bhikkhunis. And this was well established, and they were well versed in the Dhamma. And the Buddha, in the Buddha's teaching, he never called it Buddhism. He simply said, I'm teaching the Dhamma. It became known as the Dhamma, Buddha Dhamma. And it is interesting too that, going back just a little bit, just before the Buddha renounced the palace life, this is what was going through his mind. It shows you kind of what was in his mind as he was contemplating these things. He said, he was contemplating old age, sickness, and death. He said, why should I, who am subject to birth, sickness, old age, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, why do I seek the same things? Why am I going out trying to find enjoyment in what is also subject to birth, sickness, old age, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair? Why don't I, who am still young, why don't I seek the deathless? Why don't I seek the unborn? That state that's beyond birth, old age, sickness, and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. That's how he thought. And so that's what led him to renounce, leave the palace, as I've already had mentioned. But that was how he thought in his mind, How many people think that these days? Not very many people think like that. But anyway, so coming back to the so the Sangha was established, and then when the Buddha was 80 years old, he attained what is called the parinibbana. He was getting, his body was getting frail and so on, but it is said that if he wanted to, he could have, with his psychic power, prolong or delay his actual death, but he didn't want to do that because the Buddha Sasana, the order of monks and nuns, lay people, had been established. They all knew the Dhamma. They knew how to teach. They knew how to teach others. So he said, my work here is done. I don't want people to get too attached to this body they call the Buddha, or get too attached even to me. So when he was in Kusinara, he'd gone to Kusinara and to attain parinibbana. Now, the Buddha did not die. When you talk about the Buddha dying or even Arahants dying, you don't say they died. You say they attained parinibbana. Because actually the Buddha died before he died. That means the Buddha's mind died to greed, hatred, and delusion. It died to dualistic perception. It died to I, me, and mine, grasping consciousness. And so actually in the Dhamma teachings, real death is ego death. It means when the self-created I dissolves and doesn't come back anymore. That's called the unborn state. That was before birth and that was never born and never dies. You could call it the eternal, or the Sanatana Dharma, eternal Dharma. But in the Dhamma language, we usually call it the deathless state, or the Amata Dhamma. So anyway, so he attained the parinibbana. And it is said that when he told Ananda to take him, his chief disciple, there was 2 sal trees growing, maybe a few meters apart. And the Buddha said, I'm going to lay down here between these 2 sal trees to attain parinibbana. And people went out to the surrounding countryside saying, oh, the Buddha's going to attain parinibbana. So there was a big crowd of people who came to pay their last respects. And people were crying and, they'd washed their hair and put on their good clothes and they were coming out and they were crying and they were, bowing down to the Buddha. He was laid out there, sort of meditating. And it is said that the trees it wasn't the season for the bloom of the sal trees, but they bloomed anyway and fell onto the body of the Buddha. And then the Buddha told the people, he says, don't feel sorry that the Buddha is passing away. I've taught you everything I could possibly teach you. The Sangha is developed. And he also, devas were coming down to pay their last respects to the Buddha too. And he said, you see all these people are crying and weeping because the Buddha was passing away. And even Ananda and some of the other monks who should have known better, they were also crying and despondent because the Buddha was passing away from them, leaving this world. And the trees were blooming, the petals were falling. And he said, this is not the way people honor the Buddha. And there was one monk named Anuruddha who was an Arahant, and he had attained the psychic power. He was a very powerful monk. But he was out in the forest meditating. And some of the Buddha's disciples saw him and said, look at Anuruddha, he's not even coming to weep at the Buddha and so on. The Buddha's passing away and he's sitting over there by himself meditating. And the Buddha said, that's my real disciple. That's the way people honor the Buddha, by meditating, not by crying and weeping and offering flowers and things like that. You really honor the Buddha and respect the Buddha by practicing the Dhamma and by, practicing, perfecting your meditation. And then the last words that he uttered were, all conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your salvation with diligence. You know, here are trees, here are the roots of trees, you know, go out and meditate. But those were his last words. Impermanent are all conditioned things, work out your salvation with diligence. Meaning that each person only by themselves has to work out their own, karmic knots and to unravel the veils of illusion and conditioning within their own mind to attain liberation. So that was the Buddhist Parinibbana. And why do we recognize that? Because it was, the Buddha, as I mentioned, the Buddha could have prolonged his life longer, but he didn't want people to get attached to the Buddha. And so he chose to follow the teachings of impermanence, of anicca. And even the Buddha's body was anicca, and it would pass away. But again, the Buddha, only his body passed away. The mind, there's no way of telling where the mind went because basically the conditioned mind was disbanded. But anyway, so those three events, the birth, the enlightenment, and the parinibbana of the Buddha, these are what we try to recollect and remember and ponder over that, but try not to see it as happening to that person. But how does that relate to our own life? How does that relate to our own birth and our life and our own death? And so I want to take a little bit to kind of try to put that into some perspective on the aspect about evolution. Now, one of the main understandings about the Dhamma, as the Buddha explained in his last words, or in his first words after enlightenment, through many a long birth, I've wandered in samsara. So samsara is a term that means the rounds of being born and dying through the various realms of existence. And so according to the Dhamma teachings, this mind dies when the lifespan has come, and then it is reborn. If it's still influenced by greed, hatred, and delusion, if it still has the accumulated karma with it, then like that, when a person dies, that consciousness is pulled like a magnetic force and attracted to a place where it would resonate with whatever vibration that he had before he died, mental vibration. So if a person's mind was full of greed, hatred, and delusion, it would be attracted to a place where he would also be able to experience greed, hatred, and delusion. But if it had a more godly qualities and was full of peace and harmony and understanding and not so much ego, then it might be born in a heaven world. Or if it had done really bad karma, killing, stealing, hurting others, and so on, that they could be reborn as an animal or even in the hells. So anyway, that's called the samsara. And that's been going on since beginningless time. There was no first point when that was, when the first human beings or any type of sentient being started living. So basically, and if we reflect on evolution, let's say even in the, following the standard evolution theory of, let's say, Darwin. And if the first living beings originated in the ocean, then the oceans gradually filled up, and then because the need to seek more food, and the first sea creatures came out on land and mutated and grew legs and claws and, ate up things on the ground and started to climb trees. And it was all because of the desire to live and to find more places to get food and so on. So gradually all the different species evolved out of the mutation of the species, the need to adapt, eat or live or be eaten, right? So people grew ways of, animals grew ways of defending themselves, turning their bodies different colors, or growing claws, wings to fly, and so on. And so evolution was driven by that desire to live, but it was basically a group evolution. So most of the species evolved as a group, and even up to the human level. That, so if you want to follow that evolutionary theory, let's say if we evolved even from apes, right, the first human beings, and then even that went through several changes from Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon man up to the modern human being. Some of those species died out, but it was a kind of evolution, evolving. Physical bodies were evolving, adapting, and also the mind, the brain was evolving and adapting to. Consciousness was evolving and adapting. And so let's take it up to this present point. Even up to this present point, it's been largely a group evolution, because the baby inherits what their parents do normally. They think like they're trained to think and behave as a group, in different groups. So animals behave in their group of conditioning, and human beings behave in their group conditionings. Even in different, like in the different countries, they have, the people born in India are trained to think Indian style. In America, they're trained to think American, whether it's religious beliefs, ideological beliefs. And so all around the world, you find, thousands of different types of ethnic groups that have their own belief systems and so on. But usually within that group, people don't evolve much. Because if you try to change, you're seen as an outsider. You're challenging the system, right? You dare not to believe like us. Our religion, our ideological beliefs. And so people get ostracized. And that's what the Buddha did, right? Now, the Buddha was conditioned in his Vedic culture at the time. And as I mentioned, he was practicing the highest meditations that anybody knew at the time. And if he would have stayed with them and just practiced the realm of nothingness and the other kasinas, and thought that was God or thought that was cosmic consciousness, he wouldn't have evolved further into a Buddha. Or his mind and wisdom wouldn't evolve. So he broke away from the group. First of all, he broke away from the palace life. So that was one breakaway. And then he broke away from the ascetics who were practicing, mortification. So every time he was seen as a backslider, he was seen as a kind of an outcast. But he had to do that if he wanted to evolve. So the same with ourselves. We can reflect on that and bring it back to ourselves. Are we still imprisoned by the group? Do we still think the way others do? Like just this world is, created for us to enjoy and exploit and eat, drink, and be merry. And, even if it means walking over the other people. I mean, some people believe like that, or they act like that anyway. But anyway, or whatever religious beliefs one has, if we're not satisfied with our life, we have to challenge that. So even that's what the hippies did in the 60s, didn't they? They challenged the establishment of the time. And they wanted to break away from the group, but they were seen as radicals, right? But one has to have that integrity. If one wants to find liberation, you have to challenge, you have to push the envelope, the parameters of whatever conditioning that we have. And so, that is the beginning of the spiritual life. And that is beginning of the transition from what we call group evolution to individual evolution. That one has to leave the group and become a true individual. That means to think for themselves. That's what the Buddha did. He left those two teachers and sat down under the Bodhi tree and thought a different way of meditating. Instead of just meditating on white light or whatever, he turned the attention inside and became a scientist. And started observing the intricate workings of his body, mind, and nervous system through the lens of powerful concentration. And came to a different realization, something that had not been heard before. And taught the Dhamma along those lines. So just saying that to reflect on, again, why we were born. Most people don't ask themselves that question, why we were born. Or even as you're living, what am I doing with the life? Most people don't. They just, follow the established normal type of lifestyle, and they grow old and they die. But from the time a person is about 15 years old, they've reached the development of their consciousness. Ego consciousness, group consciousness. And the rest of their life until they die, their consciousness doesn't evolve very much. They might gain some knowledge about how to, build a rocket ship or, be a doctor and things like that, which is all in good. But in terms of expanding their consciousness beyond the ego-centered or mundane consciousness, most people never reach that level because they haven't dared to push the envelope. And so that's what, the beginning of the spiritual path is that beginning the individual evolution and finding a path to do that. So each person has to find a path because, we haven't been taught that. So as Buddhists, we take the Buddhist teaching as that path because the Buddha was a pathfinder. He found the path through the deathless state. And if that's something that a person wants to aspire to, if one's inspired by that, then they can follow that path. And even though we might belong to a group calling ourselves Buddhists, or people look at me and say, I'm wearing robes, oh, you're a Buddhist monk, you belong to a group. Okay, that may be on the external level. But apart from that, each person, every monk has their own individual mind. And people's minds have different degrees and levels of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, or what he called the spiritual faculties. So when one starts the spiritual path, there's something called the 5 spiritual faculties that are developed. And those are faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So in the beginning, the faith is called excited faith. Now, the first time I heard the Dhamma, I got excited because I hadn't heard it before. Wow, this is cool, Four Noble Truths, Nibbana, meditation, wow. Kind of get excited, I want to practice that. And so that's part of the intellectual, the 3 levels of right understanding. So the intellectual understanding, it sparks our excited faith. We get excited to want to do it. And as we start practicing, we realize that it may take longer than we thought. Especially with Westerners, whenever they hear something, they think because they have a college degree or something else, they should be able to kind of very quickly master something. But with meditation and with the changing or purifying one's mind, people see that it's not going to be so easy. And even I had that experience in my own experience too. So anyway, the faith, but you keep plugging along. And sometimes the practice is good, sometimes it's not, and so on. And it kind of goes up and down. But then the second level of faith is the enduring faith. And that's where the second level of understanding comes. reflective understanding. That means instead of just intellectual understanding, you're contemplating the Dhamma, contemplating the life and teachings of the Buddha and the Dhamma, and getting inspiration from that, reading the suttas, reflecting on that, reflecting on life. And it kind of keeps you going. Even though your meditation might not be progressing as quickly as one wanted. And so the excited faith and intellectual understanding then transforms or upgrades to enduring faith over a long period of time, many, many years, and relying on one's reflective understanding to keep one going through until one gradually overcomes doubts. And at some point you enter the stream, you attain that first glimpse of liberation and enter the stream. And at that point, you've overcome your doubts and your faith becomes unshakable. Before that, with enduring faith, there could still be the possibility that someone comes by, a clever, talking person from another religion. I'm not going to mention names, but, and you might start doubting, well, maybe this other religion is actually, might be better. I don't know, promising different things, So that could still happen for somebody who has not attained that entering the stream. But once you attain entering the stream, you overcome those doubts, and you overcome the personality belief, and so that becomes unshakable faith, and that's connected with the Sutta, with the Bhavanamaya Panya, with that deep meditative insight that comes. It's no longer intellectual wisdom or reflective wisdom, but it's actually penetrative wisdom that realizes the truth. So anyway, and so in developing that faith, and the faith gives you energy. Because if you don't have faith, you're not going to give the effort to practice. And as you practice, what did you practice is mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So first you have to become mindful. And through the practice of mindfulness, you gain concentration. And with the combination of mindfulness and concentration, one reaches those deeper levels of wisdom. So that's how that path of the evolution continues. So we've all evolved up to this point where nature has done as much as it can for you. Learn how to drive a car, you learn how to do this and that, but yet things like COVID-19 and pandemics come along and shatter a lot of people's illusions. So in some sense, there is a kind of evolution, but there's also can be a de-evolution. And as I mentioned before, there's two types of pandemic: outer pandemic and inner pandemic. The outer pandemic is diseases that, because of our behaviors, we might have contributed to certain diseases of becoming more prevalent. But the inner disease of greed, hatred, and delusion, that's one we keep on spreading to others too. So the Buddha taught social distancing to prevent the inner pandemic. That means don't associate with foolish people, or don't associate with people who want to just drag you backwards in terms of their negative behaviors and their unskillful behaviors or their wrong views and so on. And wearing a mask, protect yourself. Watch what you're speaking. Actually, wearing masks would be good for people because they might not talk so much foolishness or other types of bad speech if they had to wear a mask all the time. So, in some ways, there are kind of some similarities there. But no, I don't want to make a joke of the pandemic. But outer pandemics may come and go, but the inner pandemic of greed, hatred, and delusion, if that's not checked, that will continue to spread indefinitely, as it has been since the beginning of time. And so it's only a person who undertakes the spiritual path and starts following the right path of to liberation, that they break away from that group conditioning and break out of the inner pandemic and create a new pandemic of wisdom, spreading wisdom. The Buddha created a new pandemic, spreading metta, compassion, the Brahma Viharas, the practice of meditation and wisdom. That should be, the positive inner pandemic that we as practitioners should try to cultivate and spread and share with the world as we go on, evolving to those higher and higher levels of mental evolution, where it evolves even beyond the I, me, mind consciousness to attain that liberated state of awareness. So this is how we should try to see and reflect on the meaning of Vesak, that the Buddha did that out of compassion for the world. Out of his great compassion, he undertook the life of a bodhisattva for many 500 or more lifetimes, perfecting the paramitas, just so that he could come to that last lifetime on earth to spread the message of the Dhamma, which has lasted all these 2,500 years, and the Dhamma is growing more and more. That inner pandemic, Dhamma pandemic. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today, and try to encourage you to continue to deepen your understanding of the Dhamma and practice and develop those levels of faith, from excited faith to enduring faith. Even when things are bad, you can reflect on the Dhamma. This too will pass, and because everything is impermanent, and then the mind will go on and keep evolving until one overcomes those doubts, and that faith becomes unshakable. So friends, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and so we're not going to have any questions and answers today, but I'm available if you want to send me an email. If you have some question or so, you could email me privately. I'm not going to give my email address out in the public, but anyway, so we still want to now have a period of meditation, and we're going to take a short break to use the restroom, to take a drink of water, and then we're going to start, as we normally do, with a few yogic stretches. And I'll put the notice up there. There'll be maybe a notice put up on the board while we're taking a short break. So take about 5 minutes break and we'll come back. For those who want to partake in the meditation, it's late over in Europe and other places. Of course, you may want to take your rest, and maybe we'll see you here next week. And thank all of you for attending. And remember, mindfulness a day keeps dukkha away.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so we'll be starting the yoga now. I think you should all be able to see me on the screen there. And can begin with just try to stand straight, relax your arms at the sides. Try to feel the height and weight of your body over the feet. Are you recording now? And take some deep, slow breaths. It'll take 3 or 4 seconds to slowly breathe in, hold the air in the lungs, 2 or 3 seconds, then slowly breathe out. Just thinking like this to yourself, breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. So we combine these simple exercises, coordinating them with the same deep, slow breathing. We do the movement while breathing in, holding the position for a few seconds with the air held in the lungs, and then returning to the starting point or the opposite direction on the out breath. And repeat each exercise 3 times. So on the next in-breath, raise your arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, and stretch your head back, and stretch upwards at the same time. And turn the palms down on the out breath, touch the top of your head, the out breath. And again, in breath, palms up, straighten the arms, stretch the head back, stretch. Out breath, touch the top of the head. And once more, in breath, palms up. Stretch the hands up, head back. Hold it a little longer. And release the fingers. On the out breath, bring the arms back down to the sides. And relax. Just close the eyes. Try to mentally feel the standing body, feet pressing the floor, the arms and hands at the sides, the head balanced on top. Just mentally remember standing, standing, standing. It's the present moment of the body. Just keep letting go of your thoughts. Just let the thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Keeping the attention focused on feeling the body. On the next in breath, push up on your toes while raising the arms over the head in this way. And stretch upwards, touch the ceiling. Out breath, arms back to the sides, feet to the floor. Again, in breath, up. Use the breath to help lift the body. Stretch. Out. Once more, in. Out. Relax. Just try to feel the increased body sensations generated by the movement and breathing, the increased heart beating, tingling or prickling sensations. Or just feel where the clothing rubs against the skin of your chest, shoulders, arms. Just present moment sensations. Okay, next we'll do side bending using both arms. So on the next in breath, raise both arms up. Try to keep the fingers and the arms straight, parallel to each other. The arms close to the head. On the out breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. Feel that stretch in the side. Try to keep the arms, fingers straight. In breath, lift up. And then the other side, out breath. In. Again to the right, out breath. In. Out. In. Once more to each side, out breath. In breath. On the out breath, lower the arms back to the sides. Just relax. Just feel the feet pressing the floor. Especially try to also feel the increased pulsation of sensations in your hands and fingers. Life force vibrations. Just mentally remember the present moment of standing, 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 here and now of the body. Okay, now, lightly press the front of your legs with your hands and fingers. On the in-breath, turn the palms outward, bring them together at the chest and over the head. As the hands go up, stretch your head back to look up at the hands and arch your lower spine a little bit, bending back a little bit, not too far. And stretch upwards at the same time. And on the out breath, bringing the hands back down to the chest, straightening up a bit. And the arms back to the sides. Touch the front of the legs. One long out breath. And the next in breath, palms outward, together at the chest, over the head. Stretch the head back, arch the spine. Out breath, hands to the chest, back to the sides. Once more, in breath. Out breath. Relax. And just keep the attention focused on and in the body, feeling all the different sensations, the clothing touching the skin, increased heart beating, pulsation. prickling sensations, all of those you should be able to easily notice. It's all right there beneath your nose. This body. Okay, one last exercise, the head turning. When you're doing this, try not to turn your shoulders like that, but just, it's a neck exercise, not a shoulder exercise. Unless you have a real stiff neck. So on the in-breath, just try to pivot the head to the right. Concentrate into the neck vertebrae. Try to look over your right shoulder. On the out-breath, turn the head 180 degrees back to the left to look over the left shoulder. Again, in-breath back to the right. Try to imagine or feel neck vertebrae loosening up, squirting oil between the vertebrae. Out breath back to the left. In breath to the right. Out breath left. And the next in-breath, let the head stop in the center, relax, keep the eyes closed. Try to mentally feel the outline of the standing body, feet pressing the floor, the arms and the hands at the sides, the head balanced on top. Just this body exactly as it is, here and now, standing, standing. Okay, now go ahead and come back to your seat and take up the meditation posture. So just get comfortable on the seat. Just feel the body pressing the floor. Cancel the video. Just mentally feel the buttocks and feet pressing the floor underneath. Feel your hands and fingers touching together. Try to feel the natural inward curve of the lower lumbar spine. Gently lift the back and the spinal column upwards. Try to imagine space between the spinal vertebrae, and feeling the head balanced on top, like balancing a soccer ball on the tip of a broomstick. Try to keep the chin level, parallel with the floor. Try to find the center of gravity of the head and spine over the hips. Relax your face muscles. Feel some sensations on your face. Feel your lips touching together. And feel the eyes resting in the socket. And the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. Relax the eye movement. From that point behind the eyes, let the awareness kind of expand back out. Try to feel the outline of the sitting body. Just basically being aware of the buttocks and feet underneath, the arms and hands at the sides, the head on top, clothing touching the skin on different places. Should be able to hold that sort of body image of sensations in the mind's eye. And just remember sitting, sitting, sitting. Then begin taking some deep, slow breaths to oxygenate the blood more. And after breathing in, to hold the air in the lungs several seconds, try to feel that subtle exhilaration of oxygenating blood cruising through the system. And feel the relaxing contraction of the longer out breath, riding the out breath down to the in, to feel the last bit of air go out. Just try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that, cultivating this basic mindfulness. And breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Now we're going to try to count our breaths from 1 to 10 to try to develop a more precise concentration. Still keep your attention focused in the middle of the body on the movements of the abdomen, stomach, rib cage, or chest. You still try to take some slightly deeper breaths to feel the breathing more clearly, to help concentrate. So with the next expanding in breath, mentally count 1. With the contracting out breath, also count 1. The next expanding in breath, count 2. Contracting out breath, count 2. The next in breath, 3. Out breath, 3. In breath, 4. Out breath, 4. In breath, 5. Out breath, 5. In breath, 6. Out breath, 6. In breath, 7. Out breath, 7. In breath, 8. Out breath, 8. In breath, 9. Out breath, 9. In breath, 10. Out breath, 10. Now discontinue the counting. Discontinue any controlling the breath, letting the breath return to its uncontrolled rhythm, but continue to follow, to feel it. The residual or shorter expansions and contractions, however it goes. And just mentally know when the breath is coming in, and mentally know when the breath is going out, knowing by feeling it. You can make these brief mental notes to help remember. As the breath is coming in, just remember in. The brief pause, remember sitting. And with the out breath, out. And the brief pause, sitting. We're just in, sitting. Out, sitting. It's the ongoing, continuous, present moment. of this body, sitting and breathing, developing, cultivating that full presence of attention. Feel that process, to remember that process, the present moment. And try to notice how each breath is different. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes the in-breath is longer than the out-breath. Or the out-breath is longer than the in-breath. It's always changing. Just like a scientist looking through a microscope to observe and experiment. It's called mindfulness of breathing. In, sitting. Out, sitting. Breath by breath, moment by moment, cultivating mindfulness and concentration. Try to notice and feel the soft, subtle sensations of the clothing rubbing against the abdomen, or the stomach, or rib cage, or chest during the expansion and contraction. You can feel those subtle friction sensations. That helps keep the mind awake, focused. In, sitting. Out, sitting. In the brief pauses between the breaths, you feel the outline of the sitting posture, knowing that the breathing is occurring within the larger body. This body lives on the air going in, impurities being breathed out. It's part of the clear comprehension. This breathing body is the laboratory for the meditator, for cultivating mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The mind is like a microscope. The more concentrated we become, and the details of the breathing process become clearer. Takes us deeper inside. Let's cultivate that understanding. You're sitting in the laboratory, looking through the microscope to the breathing process. With each out breath, feel or imagine the body and mind getting more and more relaxed, more and more focused. And if there's too many thoughts, you can go back to counting your breaths from 1 to 10. Try to calm your thoughts down, gain better concentration. Or from time to time, come back and take some few deep, slow breaths to help stay grounded, centered in the body, the breathing body. If you catch yourself lost in thoughts, recognize it as thinking, or lost. Take a deep, slow breath. Bring the mind back into the body like you're reeling in a fish. Get recentered in the body. Coming back to in, sitting. Out, sitting. Be alert when any unpleasant or painful sensations arise in the body to pull at the mind. Just observe those unpleasant, painful sensations. They well up, come to a peak, diminish, change, or even vanish. Just keep the body and mind soft and open around the different sensations, maybe coming and going. in or around the breathing process. If you're hearing any sounds in your house or outside where you are, distract the attention, just note them as just hearing, or sound. Try not to follow them or think about the sound. Keep coming back to just sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing, breath by breath, moment by moment. From time to time, in the pause between the breaths, check the posture. The chin is drooping down and the spine is slouching. Just mindfully straighten back up. Notice the difference in the clarity of the attention. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Thoughts come and go. Sounds come and go. Various unpleasant or painful sensations come and go. Sleepiness comes and goes. These are all just the continuous changing conditions of the world coming and going through this body and mind. The flow of impermanence. Throughout the whole flow of impermanence, the body just keeps sitting and breathing, sitting and breathing. Sight, sound, smells, taste, touches, thoughts, desires, aversions, just impermanent phenomenon coming and going through this breathing body. The body doesn't care, just keeps sitting and breathing. This breathing body is the lifeline, or the life preserver for this consciousness. A lifeline to the present moment awareness. To the ocean of present moment awareness. If we lose that connection to the breathing body, to the present moment, and the mind gets pulled underneath the waves of dark emotions, conflicted thoughts, worry, fear, anxiety, greed, hatred, or deluded thought. This breathing body, the present moment, is always there, just beneath your nose. Sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing. This breathing body is the only reliable or constant companion that we have in life, because it's always there just beneath your nose. Your wife, family members, others come and go. This breathing body is always there, like your trusted dog, sitting at your feet. Just sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing. Just feeling the different sensations coming and going, life force vibration. The flow of impermanence, the perception of impermanence is the first deep insight in mindfulness meditation. The insight that everything is just arising and vanishing through this breathing body with its 6 senses. 5 physical senses, and the mind is the 6th. Just impermanent conditioned phenomenon. Even the sense of I or me is just a thought bubble passing through awareness. This is what the Buddha understood in his night of enlightenment. Meditators like the mental scientists, observing, understanding the nature of this conditioned consciousness, understanding the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness, as they're just continually changing, arising and vanishing in this natural present moment awareness. It's connected to the breathing body. The connection to the breathing body is like the anchor of the ship. The ship is our conditioned mind. If we don't have an anchor embedded into the ocean floor, the ocean of awareness, the present moment, and the mind ship gets blown in all the directions of the wind, crashing into other ships, capsizing, getting thrown up onto the rocks. That's why the Buddha taught the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of breathing as the first 2 objects of developing mindfulness and concentration, because it's that natural connection to the present moment. Instead of absorbing your attention into some idea or infinite light or some other mental images, we open up into the open stream of natural present moment awareness. And in that awareness, we understand the 4 Noble Truths. That suffering arises when we identify and cling to any of the aggregates of sense objects, feeling, perception, wantings, volition, habits. We see them as just impermanent source of suffering if we ignorantly cling to them, and how they just come and go on their own. There's no owner or controller. They're anatta, no self. They don't belong to anybody. They come and go according to the accumulated karmic conditions. That is the clear seeing of a meditator, of the vipassana meditator. This is cultivation of the right view.
Sambi sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atanibindati dukhi Isamango visuddhiya nati janam apanyacha panyanati ajaito Yam hi janancha panyacha Siri nibbana santiki. All conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body and mind and world are impermanent. All impermanent things, when clung to with ignorance, bring suffering. And all the Dhammas, conditioned as well as the unconditioned, are without any owner or controller. They're not self. When one understands these characteristics with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to purity, path to the higher evolution, to liberation. And there's no meditation without wisdom, no wisdom without meditation. One who both meditates and is wise is close to peace and freedom. And thus spoke the Buddha, the awakened. Now we're going to spend the last couple minutes just sending out thoughts of friendliness, of metta, best wishes to all living beings. First of all, just again take a few deep, slow breaths. Fill up the lungs.
As you're breathing in and holding in the lungs, try to imagine that oxygenated blood going out to all the cells in the body, being like sending metta to your cells of the body, sending them that life force, friendly life force. And they rejoice and bathe in that rich oxygenated blood, bathing all the cells and tissues of the body. On the out breath, feel that pleasant, relaxing feeling of body and mind as you're breathing out. It's like sending metta to yourself. And on the next out breaths, you can imagine the life force. Just imagine it being the metta, pure wisdom, love, pure energy being sent outwards. Just imagine this metta energy on each out breath going through the fields and hills and valleys, through the towns and cities, and spreading out over the whole earth. It's like waves of metta energy with each out breath. Just with the idea that may all living beings, wherever they might be, living near or far, visible or invisible, weak or strong, may all living beings be free from greed, hatred, fear, and ignorance. May all beings be free from worry, anxiety, resentment, animosity. May all beings be free from the self-created sufferings of body and mind created by their unskillful, ignorant thoughts, speech, and action. May all beings have the patience, strength, mindfulness, and wisdom to meet and overcome all difficulties in life. May all beings be able to hear the mind-healing teachings of the Dhamma, to learn and practice meditation, to set their mind in the right direction, for transitioning from group evolution to individual evolution, the path of Dhamma. May all beings be able to live peacefully and harmoniously together, understanding the ultimate interconnectedness and interdependence of all things. May all beings be well, mindful, and wise. May all beings be well, mindful, and wise. Just like a mantra reverberating throughout space. Well, peaceful, and wise. Dukkha pata ca nidukkha, bhaya pata ca nibbaya, soka pata ca nisoka, hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way, may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. And thus spoke the Buddha. So to finish the meditation, for those who like, you can join in chanting the word sadhu 3 times slowly with the breathing, chanting on a long out breath. Okay, so one more time, just place your hands at the edge of your knees and take a deep breath. As you breathe in, stretch your head back and arch your lower spine, pulling your hands against the knees to help arch backwards a little bit. Feel those sensations. And then the head, lift the head up, and on an out breath, press the chin to the top of the chest to stretch the neck vertebra. And on the in-breath, lift the chin up level. On the in-breath, relax on the out-breath. Okay, friends. So this brings our little Vesak gathering to an end, but realize the process of developing awareness and developing the path never ends. We should cultivate and have our mindfulness with us, whether we're standing, walking, sitting, laying down whenever awake, cultivating mindfulness, clear comprehension. So thank you for all joining in, and next week again we'll be meeting on Sunday afternoon, and if you're interested, on Wednesday evenings, if you don't already know, we have the Sutta study class on Wednesday evenings, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And this week I'm going to be going over the Mahachattari Sutta, the Great 40. And it's a unique explanation of the way to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. So, if you like to, I think most of you probably have the links to that Sutta study class. If you don't, you can always email me at info@lionwisdom.org. And those links can be sent to you. So,
Sadhu, sadhu.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Bhante.
Don't forget, mindfulness a day keeps the peace. Technical difficulty.
Thank you.
Nobody that hears, nothing heard, nobody that hears. hearing. That's the right view. It leads to the deathless state. Okay, friends, if anybody wants to kind of hang around a little bit and, you know, to say a few words to me, you can do that. Otherwise, you can sign off. And see you again. Right. Now I'm seeing some different faces. I see Fabiana from Portugal, right? Nibuti from South Germany, and Arturo from Sao Paulo. Very nice. Echo. That's what our mind is always doing. Echoing everything it hears and so on. So how's everybody doing in the amidst all this pandemic restrictions and so on? Getting an extra meditation? I hope. You probably got the mic right in here.
They can.
If anybody wants to say something, they can unmute their mic. And, otherwise, I guess nothing too much to say, right?
They can unmute themselves if they want to say. They hang on. Yeah. They can.
How many of you have been attending the Sutta studies on Wednesday nights? I know for those living in Europe, it's too late at night. But you know, you have the recordings, the YouTube recordings, and actually from today, these Zoom talks are being live streamed on YouTube. Is that right?
Today got first time. We tried it.
First time we are trying it today. So if sometime in the future, if more than 100 people try to join the Zoom, they can always switch over to the live YouTube broadcast on our YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, Lion of Wisdom.
This Lion of Wisdom
Meditation Center.
Meditation Center. Google that in on the YouTube search thing. And it should go to that also. Yeah. Okay, friends. So it was nice sharing with you today, and I'm going to. There's no other words or questions. We'll see you again.
Thank you,
All the
Bhante.
best.
Thank you.